IoT is a very important and fundamental Web3 technology. It's starting to permeate our lives so thoroughly that we are unaware that it is even there. We expect to stream Netflix directly from our televisions. We expect Siri and Alexa to answer when we call out to them. We take it for granted that our thermostats have learned the temperatures that we prefer at any given time and on any given day of the year. The technology is not always kind and gentle, however. There is another side. Today, to speak with us about IoT in general, and specifically video surveillance and video analytics, is John Cobbs. Hopefully, our conversation sparks some valuable ideas. Today on ideaBOX, I have the pleasure of having as a guest my good friend and fraternity brother, I might add, John Cobbs. And he's an IT sales leader at Arrow Electronics. And he's focused on embedded solutions in IoT. He's been in the game for 18 plus years, the commercial and the public sector sales. And he holds a Bachelor of Arts double major in both history and economics from the University of Virginia. And as you can see, we're having a little subliminal battle. He's got his UVA shirt on, and I've got my George Mason Patriots shirt on. And so, a little bit of a fun and friendly, Virginia rivalry. Anyway, welcome, John.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Yeah. So today's topic, and we've been talking about this. Generally we're going to be talking about IoT, but there's this whole play with video cameras. When it comes to IoT, and I guess just to set the table, would you mind giving the viewers your definition of what IoT is?
Oh, so that's an interesting point when you say the definition of IoT. For me, Internet of Things, it's a collection of data, from sensors. A lot of this data that's collected, it can be both utilized for its purpose, but also can have a point purpose, which is called dark data. And that's just the data that's not being used. But for the most part, when it comes to IoT, I guess the best definition of the Internet of Things is a collection of data that's going to be utilized for some purpose of analytics, for whether it's going to be a gain financially or just for a situation that just makes life better, so to speak.
So that's interesting, and I think the viewers might also find this interesting, and actually they might find it telling, because we're talking about IoT, the Internet of Things, and you immediately went to the data. And I think most of us, when we think of IoT, and I say most of us, but like I see the full picture, that you do. But most of us, when we think of IoT, we think of things. You see the IBM commercials, where they're talking about like this world where everything's interconnected. So your dishwasher is a thing, your coffee maker is a thing, your refrigerator is a thing. Your refrigerator is so smart that when you run out of beer, like it automatically like sends an order to Whole Foods, right, to Amazon, so that they can have Whole Foods deliver your favorite beer. And that is, for sure part of the things. But you went immediately to the data. Can you speak to the the hardware, data, software like relationship?
Yeah. So the reason I went to the data is because, like I said, it's a point of collection. And when you think about IoT, there's different levels of IoT. You have those end-to-end solutions. You have, which is going to be like that ring. You put the ring on your house. That's an end-to-end solution. But then you also have those single-purpose kits, which those are kits that are going to be tied to a sensor, which that data is going to then resonate to a gateway, and that gateway then goes to a platform. And then you have box level products, products that are ready built. Once you buy them, you take them home, you install them, you're good to go. And that could be, a cell phone as well as the ring as well, that could fall that category. And then you have the components modules and the boards that falls in IoT. And those component modules, like the boards, that's where all the sensors are, the motherboards, and those boards is what goes into what that sensor, the purpose of that sensor. Some of these sensors can be used to detect sound. Some can detect motion. Some can detect temperature, moisture. There are sensors for a lot of things that are out there on the daily usage.
No, I feel you. So I guess the reason why you went to the data, and this is me making an assumption about why you went there, is that the actual physical devices, from a systemic perspective, the physical devices, is it that the only purpose they serve or the primary purpose they serve is data capture? Is that it?
Um, I think that's some of it. So I think when I went straight to the data is because when you collect, these sensors and you collect the data, right? It's sensing its purpose, right? So that's why I kind of brought the data up.
Mm,
Because if you're going to detect, like so for example, the ring, right? When you put that into your house and install that, you're using that for, that you can physically authenticate somebody coming to your home. If you want to open the door and let them in, you can actually physically see, hey, this is my aunt. My aunt's dropping a pie off for me. Let me open the door for her because I actually see her, right? Or if UPS or Amazon's going to drop off a package, yeah, I get an email that stemmed from that either Amazon user or that UPS employee who's going to drop my package off. He hits the little boom, his little button that says that he delivered it. He takes a picture of it. That picture sent to me. Now, if you drop it off my house and I get the picture and I get the notification, my email that you dropped it off, but when I get home, the package is gone. Well, somebody must have stole it. It's not here, right? I got a picture that was on here. But if I had the ring, I can actually use that, for like you said, package theft mitigation, where I can actually say, hey, here's where you dropped the package off, but guess what? Here's somebody I don't know that came to my house that took my package. So that's one of the use cases for the ring where you're actually collecting data, for a purpose, right? But it's kind of those indirect and those direct values that you get from some of those products, such as the ring. When you think of IoT, you can think of IoT. For me, IoT, I see it as a lot of different things because I have a lot of conversations with people on different levels of how they're going to utilize IoT from a solution perspective, where it's something that you hold in your hand, like a phone, or something on a larger scale, like if you want to manage traffic patterns in like urban areas, like in Austin. City of Austin, they have a situation where they have all their traffic lights connected to each other because they want to be able to get rush hour
mm,
traffic in and out in a certain time period, right?
right.
So IoT and data for me, it kind of goes hand in hand because you're collecting a lot of data. And for me, I ask a lot of my customers, what are you going to do with all this data once you have it? I know you have an initial solution that you're building out, but you're probably going to collect some indirect data points that could probably be used for another phase of your project. Or if you want to create another product, right, utilizing the data that you're collecting from your initial.
Right. Yeah. So that I guess to sort of like sum that up, at least the way I see it, I think the physical part of IoT, the part that most people think of when they think IoT, the actual devices that have the sensors, that are doing the collection, that's like the tip of the spear. And I guess depending on the device, the purpose may not be just data collection, because it could be that the things are connected because they're actually receiving commands to do certain things as opposed to just collecting data. And we can get into some of that in a second.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but so, one of the things that you and I have been talking about, I'm going to raise that here. We've been talking about, video cameras and just video in general as it relates to IoT. And you spend, your entire days, you're in IoT all day, every day. You're an expert in the field. Why is it that somebody who is so focused on IoT is interested in facial recognition software? Can you explain that?
Ooh, that's interesting because again, it's a data point. When you're thinking of like biometrics,
Mhm.
cell phones, right? Instead of using a password, you're now going to use your face, or you're using a thumbprint, something that clearly identifies you and only you, right? That's your thumbprint because only one of you will have the same thumbprint. Your face, right? They take your data points from your eyes, your nose, your mouth, and that's how you use that for security purposes. Also facial recognition, because you can use it in so many different ways in regards to like tracking a user. So if you're looking from a marketing perspective and you want to provide your clients or your soon to be customers with information that's pertinent to them, you kind of want to know who they are, where they go, where do they shop, what do they look at, what do they browse.
Mm.
So then you can now send them information that's pertinent to them, right? That way you get it's useful marketing. So that way you're not getting this junk mail anymore. And it's kind of scary. Years ago, you would get those little junk mail packages because you were like, why are they sending me this? Like, wow, it's interesting. These are things I actually buy, right? I started
Right.
noticing lately in my mail, I'm only getting things based on what I actually buy. from the vendors I
Mm.
actually go to. And in a way, it's scary, but also it's smart because now I'm not getting loaded and bogged down with a lot of useless knowledge that I don't need, right? Imagine collecting coupons for dogs. I don't own a dog. I don't want coupons for dogs and dog food, right? So when I look at some of these different use cases in facial recognition, and I'll get to that point. I'm sorry, I kind of digress. Well,
That's fine.
again, you're tying data to a person, and by doing that with video analytics, I mean, there's so many different ways with facial recognition of what you can do from a security perspective.
Now,
Um,
let me butt in right there for a second because I hear you say facial recognition, and then I just heard you use the term video analytics. Those aren't one and the same, are they?
they can okay, so they kind of are, right? So, but they're slightly different. So facial recognition, it's software that's going to recognize your face, right? It takes the data points. And
Mhm.
when you look at video analytics, it's going to analyze video. What is it analyzing? Your face. So if I want to capture, so for example, I know this was in the news a while ago.
Is it analyzing your face in a crowd or analyzing your face by
Both,
itself?
both. So
Okay.
initially, the problem with facial recognition software was that if you were in a crowd, you couldn't do a crowd assessment because it would take the pictures of all the faces as one block. So it couldn't
Mm,
identify you individually. Well, the technology's gotten better. It's now able to take the data points of each face and recognize each face as a separate being and then trying to figure out, well, who is this person in the crowd? So there is crowdsourcing software that is out there that people can leverage now because the technology has gotten better. So it can actually pinpoint you as an individual through crowdsourcing.
yeah. Now you said something earlier, and I actually kind of wanted to sort of like poke at it a little bit. You were saying like uh, you're only getting I guess advertisements or marketed. You're only getting marketed the types of products and services that you want or that you are interested in, and that you didn't want to be marketed about dog food because you don't own a dog, and that makes sense. But to some level or to some degree, I think I can see a potential echo chamber there, because if on the one hand I'm only marketed the things that I already buy, well, I don't really need marketing. I know that I want and need these things. I'm going to buy them anyway. I don't need you telling me to buy my my protein shakes, my whey protein, every month. I'm going to buy that anyway. Just that becomes junk mail and an annoyance.
Mm-hmm.
So, but at the same time, though, if there's something that I know that I need that maybe I forgot to buy, then maybe that prompt, it's. I don't think it's all good or all bad, but I am saying like it does seem like there could be the potential for creating an echo chamber, where all you're doing is getting advertisements, as my friends across the pond would say. You're only getting ads for things that you're already going to buy anyway.
Exactly. So that is true to a degree. But I think if you look at Amazon, what they've been doing lately is that when you buy things, they kind of group them like, hey, most users that buy this protein may actually buy these amino acids with this protein, right? Or if you buy the amino acids and you buy a certain protein, you might be looking for some new workout shoes, right? So they lump together the things that most users, such as with your profile, may
Yeah,
actually go after. So I agree. I
yeah,
get your point. You can
that's
be
that.
you can create that echo chamber where you're only going to buy the things they show you. Well, that's not necessarily smart if you're looking to add on. So it's kind of like add the fries. Whenever you sell somebody something, always add the fries,
Right,
right? That's what they're going to do
right,
here. If you're going to buy the protein, well, what about these other products? Users who
right.
bought this protein will buy this. Would you be, and then you can look at it like, And nowadays, which is so much better, is that sometimes when you buy things and people suggest things to you, you notice how nowadays people actually are rating the product. And that product rating, they're able to take a real person's rating and then use that and throw that and kind of like throw that in your face, like, hey, there's like 9 users who bought this product in your area that love this, right? And you're kind of like, wow,
Yeah,
people like this. So it's kind of like when you want to get someone's opinion on something before you buy something, like years ago when we were younger, you saw some new shoes and you say, hey, I want to get the new Jordans. What do you think about them? You get your opinions from your friends. Nowadays, when you're buying things, you're getting opinions from actual consumers that are buying things that buy things just like you would buy. And so
right.
it's kind of interesting how they're using analytics to try to analyze who we are. And it's like we could probably have to talk about this like later because
Yeah,
it's
that's the
a
whole science of predictive modeling,
exactly. But I think
which
that right
is pretty
now,
deep.
with what you're talking about with the facial recognition, I like the facial recognition components because there's so much more you can do around facial recognition, especially when it comes to an
Well,
IoT play.
let's talk about that. So just so that everybody, everybody watching can get an understanding. What are some of the IoT applications, for video cameras?
Okay, so I would think that when you say applications, I think that with your cell phone, right, you have the cell phone, which comes with an application with video. You also have with IBM, we sold something called video analytics, which was tied to the facial recognition. You also had the Ring. You also had Tesla. Don't forget Tesla's come up with that. They have these cameras, these micro cameras all around the vehicle. And if somebody walks to your vehicle, you can take a picture of who that person is. You can just walk up to it, not trying to do anything derogatory negative to the vehicle. But if you just wanted to know that, hey, somebody was too close to your vehicle, it's
Right.
a picture.
So that right there alone, that's two applications. That's navigation and security, right? Navigation for self-driving cars and security. Excuse me. So it sounds like there's boundless applications.
Yeah, and last thing I will add, I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No worries.
ATMs now. So think about ATM. When you go and you use your ATM,
Mm.
it takes an automatic snap of your picture, right?
That's
And
right.
after a while, if it's somebody else using your card, it'll notify you. Hey, we're getting some usage, some uncommon usage from your card. And the reason why they're telling you that is because they have a picture that doesn't look like you, but somebody using your
Mm.
card because they have your PIN number, right? And
Yeah,
also, and because I live in the metro area, right, we have the toll road, right? On the
Okay.
toll
Oh
road,
yeah.
I found this out by mistake. I bought a new car and I'm using my old car's sensor because I don't drive my old car. It's parked. So I'm using my little Easy Pass in
Yeah.
my new car. Well, I'm driving, mind my business. I'm paying my Easy Pass because it goes through automatically. Where I get
Yep.
a letter in the mail from Easy Pass saying, hey, and it has a picture of me in my new car, and they're asking me, hey, is this you? Because we basically, they said suspicious activity. They wanted to make sure this
Wow.
activity, and if it was, please register. And they gave me an application so I can now proactively register my new car. And
That's brilliant.
they're going to go ahead and allow all the usage I've had on my new car since I've been driving it to go through without penalizing me. So that is like a use case that they're actually using to help vendors and users, right?
That is brilliant. I mean, that is absolutely brilliant. And that's an excellent way, I think, to leverage technology because sometimes technology can get in the way. Sometimes it can make things, where the intention is to make, a better use case. Sometimes it can be an annoyance, but that's a perfect way to basically like smooth out that whole use case. You didn't, because I too have had a situation where there was a problem with the Easy Pass, on that Dulles Toll Road. But this was before IoT and before video facial recognition. And what happened in my case is the state trooper showed up with a big list of tickets for supposedly unpaid trips, through the toll. I mean, we cleared it up because like there was a technical issue, but had this new technology been in place, maybe I would have had a seamless and really convenient and peaceful experience, as did you. That's pretty slick.
Exactly.
So whenever I think of like facial recognition and video surveillance and things like that, my mind always goes to the UK, right? England and very specifically like London, England, is notorious, in some ways for their, the ubiquity of video. In like all of London, you can't do anything to go anywhere, in London without being caught on camera. And London crime fighters, oftentimes, the old gumshoe or investigator out in the field, like the investigator is sitting in an office somewhere around a bunch of cameras and a bunch of video feeds, piecing together people's movements and things like that. There is a huge privacy debate around that, especially in the United States. And so I was wondering if you can, let us know, is that type of sort of video surveillance and facial recognition software, is that legal in the United States?
Okay, it depends. So I will say that when you voluntarily give up your facial recognition, your data, that's legal. So Clear, right? I don't know if you've ever gone to the airport and used Clear. Clear uses your eyes, right? But you're volunteering for them to use that data point to say, this is me going forward. Whenever I'm going to fly, I'm going to use my eyeballs. That's legal, right?
Yeah.
Now, because I give my consent. Now,
Right.
in the United States, which is, and I'm glad you brought this point up because in Asia Pac, right, in Asia, Korea, they're very
Mhm.
similar to UK. They're going to use the visual recognition, the facial recognition to help solve crimes, right,
Mm.
and various other things. United States, we're a little different. I think that right now it's interesting, but I can't tell you where it's legal, but I can tell you where it's not legal. And that's in Washington State. I think Washington State, they recently, this is back in, I want to say, in July 1st, as of July 1st of 2021, in Washington State, they passed a bill,
Excuse me.
ESSB, bless you, ESSB 6280, right?
Mm.
This was
Okay.
passed in 2020. And what this regulation does, it basically is regulating the use of facial recognition technology by the state and local government. Um, and that's in Washington State. However, when you look at in the state of New Hampshire and the state of Oregon, they prohibit the installation or using software in body cams for police officers.
Oh,
In the
wow.
state of California, and they did this back in September 2020. In the state of California, they placed a 3-year ban on the practice of facial recognition software. So it's like, wow. But as of right now, California, New Hampshire, and Oregon, they've addressed the use of facial recognition systems in police body cameras. So when it comes to the legality of where it's legal, where it's not legal, it's kind of surprising that the city of Boston and San Francisco, they banned facial recognition as well. They did it on a municipal level. But the reason I'm
Okay.
shocked about Boston is because of Boston, you had the Boston Marathon bomber, right?
Yeah, the
And
bomber. Yeah.
you would think after this took place, so just this is just as of last year, the city of Boston said, nah, it's illegal. We're going to ban facial recognition software in our city. And it's just interesting. So it depends on where you go, where you are, and where you live based on the fact of the legality of it. So right now they're still dealing with the compliance issue. There's still those civil liberties that we as citizens have that they're trying to address.
So
And
is that the core? Is that because I was about to ask you, well, why do you think some communities or some localities, are pro, video surveillance and some are anti-video surveillance?
I think it's one of those things when it comes to new technology, when people fear what they don't understand. And
Mm.
I think we can talk about this on amongst other things with new technology. And I think when you have that transparency, some people really don't like to be transparent. And I don't really know what ties that into our security. But for me, I would surrender my basic rights as long as I know we have an even level playing field of safety. And what I mean by that is, facial recognition, I think is just based on where you are as a country and what those rights are and what you believe in and core values of American citizens. But I think that right now there is no universal path in regards to how we're going to move forward with facial recognition. But because it's being used around the world, the United States still has not really come to a universal platform. But I think that with Washington State passing that ESSB 6280, I think that's going to be a basis that countries might try to go off of in regards to, how are we going to, utilize this going forward? Because if you look at some of the current events, things that happened recently, right? I mean, we can go to January 6th, 2021. After that day, and you probably tell me what happened, right? On January 6th, 2021, after that
Oh,
day,
that's Insurrection Day.
exactly 30%, there was a 30% jump in web searches for facial recognition software after that date. So
That that's interesting. So you made a comment a little bit earlier, and we were talking about this like offline, and then you just made a comment a little bit earlier, where I think your point was, if you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to hide. So what's the problem? But what comes to what comes to my mind when I hear things like that is that old Benjamin Franklin quote, and I'll read it, where he says, "Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty or safety." And actually, he said neither nor, not or,
yeah,
to correct my English. But you know, my personal perspectives on a lot of this stuff is that I'm pro privacy,
yeah,
and I'm pro privacy because I think it's a fundamental like human right, and it's just a right, and so I don't necessarily buy the logic that if you have nothing to hide, then I should let everybody like open my mail. I should let everybody like, watch what I'm doing, even when I shut the blinds in my house. And that I should let, any and everybody listen into my telephone conversations, my private conversations, which is why I use like, security apps. I'm a user of Tor. I'm a user of, end-to-end encryption. I send encrypted emails, PGP. And so like, that's just my stance. And I don't have anything to hide either. But whether I have anything to hide or not, just my perspective is that, my private information and my private communication is mine, which is why Webster's dictionary invented the word mine, because that data is mine. But speak to your perspective, because like not everybody feels the same way about these things, and I would just like for you to share your perspective on that.
And I definitely agree with that, because I've come across that quite a bit. And for me, I'm just a little shocked. I think this, and I remember that conversation. I was like, for me, I'm transparent. Like, if you want to put a video camera on me and follow me all day, first off, you're not getting any ratings, right? Because I'm not doing anything. I'm Disney, right? I am the Disney dad. I have the Disney life. I'm not doing anything that I would feel would incriminate me, right? So follow me, because for me, it's that level of playing field where I want to be safe. I think when Benjamin Franklin made that statement, he was living in a completely different time.
We're talking about IoT and video. Mm-hmm. And another thing that's been in the news recently is the, I think it's pronounced Verkada, the Verkada hack. And for our viewers who maybe are not aware of this hack, recently there was an exploit where hackers got access to over 150,000 video cameras, so that they could view everything from inside prisons to inside our children's elementary schools, to even inside Tesla factories. I mean, it ran the gamut. I mean, they had access to a lot of information. And I think a lot of those video feeds are now publicly available on the dark web. Somebody who is in IoT every day and has this special interest, in video and facial recognition and video surveillance, like what's your take on this Verkada hack?
My take is they didn't protect the edge points. I think that when a lot of conversations I have with my customers, when we talk about their solutions, their IoT solutions, when they're building this, we talk about the data, but also it comes down to who's going to protect the data. Like, we have the sensors. We know that you're going to collect the data from the sensors to the gateway, and from the gateway to your platform. Then you're going to analyze the data, but you also have to secure the data, and not just on the database level, but also on the edge level, right? Because anything that's connected to your network, you're going to be vulnerable. And when I read about this hack and I heard about it, I was like, uh-oh, somebody made a mistake, right? And that's the thing I heard about. Some of these CISOs that are out there, they're not sleeping at night, because when they have a network and they realize they have an outage, or they realize they have a vulnerability they have not assessed or addressed, CISOs can't sleep at night. So when I hear about this hack, how someone basically was able to hack into a feed, that tells me you didn't secure your endpoints. There are a few other things that weren't secured as well. And now you're going to have to go back to the drawing board and find out, how do we now secure this? Because we obviously didn't. And I think that those situations like the Verkada hack, it opens up our eyes, right, to why we're having compliance. And I think that part of that bill that I brought up, earlier with the state of Washington, which is leading, because they're actually going to lead this, because what they're doing is they just want to regulate the use of facial recognition, right? They want to make sure that the intent of the safeguards is to allow state and local government agencies to use facial recognition services in a manner that benefits society, while prohibiting uses that threaten our democratic freedoms. So they're trying to do the right job, but unfortunately, this situation is a Verkada hack. You had someone who actually hacked, and the thing is, unfortunately, there's different levels of hackers. People are going to hack what they want, and it's kind of unfortunate. But we have to do a better job to prevent whatever solution we create from being hacked.
Well, and so that's a good segue into my follow-on question for you is, there are people in the C-suite right now that are wondering, is IoT right for my business, right? Should I implement an IoT solution, and which vendors, should I deal with? if I'm implementing an IoT solution. And then they see things on the news like this hack. And sure, there's blowback to the vendors, who's the source of the hack.
Mhm.
But in your business as a CXO, you are responsible for your customers' data, right? The vendors that you use to collect data, or the vendors that you use in your technology stack, they're accountable to you, but you're accountable to your customers for the protection of their data. And so, if I'm a CEO of a company and I'm wondering, whether or not I should, move to an IoT solution for some set of services for my clients, for my customers, I might be a little bit hesitant because now I'm exposing myself to liability. So can you, from your, position, with the vendors that you deal with and the clients that you deal with, what do you say to your clients if they say, this might not be a good time because there's all these security vulnerabilities? What do you say to that?
Well, what I tell them is that, there's always going to be vulnerabilities no matter what direction you go in regards to IT. However, the fact that we it's a discussion that we're going to need to have, right? We shouldn't be afraid because we're worried about being vulnerable. I think we need to actually look into that vulnerability and find out how do we defeat that so that we can build out a secure solution where we can protect our data. I think by having those conversations and educating each other, we kind of can let the customers know that, hey, we're going to protect you. And one thing about security is that, what I've learned from most of my partners and vendors is that they gamble, right? If you can imagine, if I gave you a limited set of funds and say, okay, I'm going to give you this set budget. If you have a limited budget and you have to protect what's sacred to your organization, you're going to play some bets and you're going to secure what you think is the most important. Now, if you don't have a budget, you're literally doing more with less. So what I do usually most of my customers, I ask them, well, what's your budget? How much are you willing to invest in your security? Because the more you spend in security, the more protected you're going to be. It's kind of like the story of the three pigs. You build your house out of straw, sticks, and brick. Who has the strongest house, right? The one who invested, who took the time to build and secure their surrounding, was the pig who built out of brick. So if
Right.
you
And
secure
so,
your environment, you're going to need to invest in your security, in your cyber department, just to make sure you protect yourself.
right. But that sort of implies trade-offs, right? And so how, maybe how do your customers typically respond to that? Because I'm assuming, like, if you've got a fixed budget, and you can spend all of it on new features, or you can spend, some of it on security, which means a little bit less new features. You can spend a lot of it on security, which means a lot less for new features. And total sidebar, but like in the software business, I'm often, dealing with clients where I'm explaining to them the necessity for allocating a certain portion of the budget to quality, because the less you spend on quality, typically the more defects, the more bugs you'll have in your software. Some of those bugs can be security related, and so you can have more security vulnerabilities if you minimize your spend on quality. So from that perspective, are you met with resistance? Or do your clients, or just generally speaking, do you see that like a lot of folks just want to roll the dice? Like, look, man, we need these features so we can add, increase our revenue, and we'll deal with the security thing later. Like, how's that received?
It's usually always a kickback. Because again, but also this is part of my sales 101, knowing my customer, knowing what's important to them, what keeps them up at night. And then I kind of solve for what keeps them up at night. So, okay, we've solved this, but understand we're still vulnerable in other places. So what I've learned is that you're going to always get the kickback, but you have to speak to the things that keep them up at night and show them how we're going to work towards making this a better secure environment. Because when you look at most IT environments, protecting the edge is not necessarily important to them as compared to protecting other parts of their network. Because again, you have those internal forces of where you can be hacked internally because you have employees who are not locking their laptops, securing offices and so forth effectively, locking up the server room. But then you have those external forces where you have people who are actually trying to hack your environment. If you have a private network, where you have to physically be on site in order to get into that network, well, then that means you have to secure there's some physical securities you have to take into place as well. But overall, to answer your question, I think what I work towards when I deal with the hiccups is I basically speak to the solution and what keeps them up at night and how do we solve for that. And then we kind of move forward. Because
So,
I have, oh, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, once upon a time, I think there were a number of hacks with Linksys routers, and I think Linksys got purchased or acquired by Cisco. But it was a default no username, default password admin, and if you knew that about those hardwares, you can that was your entry point, or your ingress point into whatever network you were trying to tinker with. And I think I've made this comment myself, like when it comes to smart TVs and maybe some other devices, is that a company that has a history and background of building devices isn't necessarily a software company, and they haven't necessarily paid attention to things, because what's happening in this IoT space is former dumb things like toasters and refrigerators are now being made into smart things. Plug to my friends who started that company, but they're being turned into smart things. And sometimes the companies that are building this software to make these smart devices don't have the background to understand the security ramifications of what it is they're doing. You're basically taking the device and putting it on a network. If that device is not secure, then that's a point of entry for your friendly neighborhood hacker. So what advice do you give to IoT vendors as they're bringing their wares to market, around security?
My advice is basically you need to do your research into what you're purchasing, who you're purchasing it from. If they don't have a way to solve protecting that endpoint when you connect it to your network, you probably don't want to entertain them, because that's, again, you're exposing yourself. So I think when you look at like I can name anything, right? Like a smart light bulb. You connect it to a room, smart light bulb, a hacker comes in, they want to hack, they get your IP address and they hack your light bulb. Well, you want to make sure that there's going to be a security workaround where you're going to secure that light bulb, right? That you have a protocol in place that's going to help. So if a partner, if a customer wants to buy these smart light bulbs, the last thing you want to know is they got hacked because they installed your light bulb. So end of the day, I would want to find out what is your security protocol going forward when you're going to basically collect, these solutions. And a lot of these like consultants that are out there, these integrators that are building these solutions, they're going out there looking for the latest and greatest in vendor technology they can use. So like when it comes to wireless routers, they're looking for the most secure wireless router they're going to use to connect to their environment, because that router, right, is the gateway that's going to port information from sensor to platform, and that has to be protected. And I know Cisco has made a huge investment in regards to protecting the edge. I know Red Hat, they're doing a lot with their OpenShift product in regards to protecting the edge. So there is a focus. And with most of my customers, I tell them, hey, do your research, find out why you're selecting this vendor and why, and are you able to speak to securing, your solution for your customers? Because the most embarrassing thing you can do as an integrator is build a solution that you cannot protect your customers' data.
Yeah, it's and that's super profound. And the quickest way to lose face in the industry is to kill your credibility by creating security holes for your clients. You mentioned this smart light bulb, and I started laughing because there's this Netflix documentary about, I think it's called Spycraft or something like that. And one of the episodes they talked about putting a certain kind of light bulb inside a house that they wanted to, or office building or whatever they wanted to spy on, and they had a device that basically it would observe that light bulb, even through walls, and people speaking would cause a shift in the light, ever so subtle, and they basically could like Morse code, decode the shifts in the light production based on people speaking. But they had to do this with a listening device external, to the building. But by turning the light bulb into a smart light bulb, that same sort of manipulation of light waves, now you can just send it through the network and do the same thing. So potentially a smart light bulb could be a wire, like tap wire into your home. Anyway, I'm about to take us down a rabbit hole. We talked about cell phones and how, cell phones, they're not necessarily autonomous IoT devices because, we use them, but they're definitely, capturing data, on us all the time. Everything from our location to we actually use apps to like make them capture even more data, like picture images of our physical surroundings and whatnot. But you were telling me about this story earlier that I thought was pretty interesting, and I think you should share this with the viewers in terms of the weather application on our phones, and sort of like the crowdsourcing of information to make better weather. Why don't you speak to that?
Yeah, so that's one of those conversations we had around like IoT, those use cases, that are both positive and can be negative, right? And so when you think about cell phones, it could be an iPhone, it could be an Android. It's interesting. I learned this, recently, because with cell phones, it's very interesting because most people, they'll tell you about Big Brother, watch out Big Brother, but yet they have this cell phone that they keep in their hand, right? Yet they're paranoid about having a chip installed in their wrist, right? They go, oh, that's Big Brother, that's the new order. Well, guess what? The new world order is here, buddy. You have a cell phone. You take your cell phone with you where you go, right? MAC address tracing, GPS sharing. You share your location. When you make purchases with your cell phone and you buy something with your credit card, here I got my cell phone. You're leaving a digital footprint. So what's interesting that I learned around this crowdsourcing that the Weather Channel uses is that if you go on your generic Weather Channel app, right, on your cell phone, and the Weather Channel, when they crowdsource their information from users in a certain area, they're able to read the barometer based on the location of crowdsourcing all the users in a certain area. So that way they can make a better prediction of weather patterns in your area. And when I heard about this, I'm like, I don't recall giving you access to my cell phone to check a barometer reading in the environment. But yet this is a way in which they're using this data, and it's kind of a free access, because think about it. You have US citizens, like right now, you think about the little smartphone statistic. There are over 3 billion smartphones users in the world right now. This is as of February of 2020. Okay, as wow. February 2020, there were 3 billion smartphone users in the world. More than 5 billion people own mobile phones, and over half of those are smartphones. So there's a difference: mobile phone, smartphone. People spend an average of 3 hours and 15 minutes on their phones. Americans, we have a problem. We spend at least 5.4 hours a day using our phones. Millennials, they're a little different. They have about 5.7 hours per day, while baby boomers are really around 5 hours in their smartphone usage. You think about how people check their phones, right? People check their phones 58 times a day on average, with more than half of those occurring during work hours. So people are using their phones. They're keeping their phones nearby. 70% of mobile sessions are shorter than 2 minutes, but yet you keep your phone with you at all times. Millennials spend at least 48 minutes texting per day. Baby boomers, they might spend about 30 minutes per day. So when you think of all the time and the usage these cell phone users have, it's kind of crazy, because when you look at like the stats of how often people are around cell phones, people are around cell phones more often than we can imagine, right? And if you think about it, 31% of cell phone users don't check their phone within a few hours. 17% of cell phone users don't check their phone the full day. You'd be amazed that there's only 10% of the population of cell phone owners, that don't check their phone in over a year. And the one stat is kind of weird is that a week, 4% of cell phone users do not check their phone in like every week, right? So if somebody says, oh, I don't check my phone maybe once a week, that's 4%. So there's a lot of usage in cell phones. And with the technology that's out there, the information that can be collected from cell phones, it's kind of amazing, and again, IoT is great when you use it positively. So if the Weather Channel wants to use my barometer reading based on the location I'm at, and they want to crowdsource that, I'm okay with that. If you're going to tell me I'm having a 90-degree day with no thunderstorms, right? I'm glad to see that. But if you're collecting this data and you're making some false predictions, and I find myself prepared for a 90-degree day, and I come across a snowstorm, I'm gonna be a little salty that you're using this bad information because you're giving me bad information with the information you're collecting, and I haven't given you permission. But if you're going to use my data and you're going to use my data correctly. At least it helps, and I think that's what I see from the
I
weather.
think you probably be salty if you got a bad weather forecast, whether they use your data or not.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you want to use if you want to make me happy, use my data, use it effectively, and use it for me. And again, I know a lot of people have their perspectives on and why you use data the way you use it. But I think overall, when it comes to IoT, I think there's a lot of great use cases that are being used right now. I think it's making the world a better place. I talk a lot in regards to we didn't talk about this earlier, but one of the things that I've been getting a passion for around IoT is smart workplace and smart buildings. I love to talk about smart buildings and I love to talk about smart workplaces because those are conversations that one, smart buildings impact people's lives. And if you can find a way to make a building efficient because you're gonna take a reading of the temperature throughout the day to find out how do you monitor the heat and air conditioning to save money, that's a great use case. When we used to work in build, remember we used to work in buildings? We used to work in these little high rises, right? And we want to get on the elevator. You'd hit the button, you usually had to wait. Like, man, why does it take forever to get this elevator? Well, nowadays with smart buildings, it reads and learns the patterns and the usage patterns within a building at any given time of day. So therefore, you're not waiting but seconds because the elevator is going to park itself at the best possible place to get the optimal usage for its users within that building. That's what a smart building can do for you. So if you think about it, I want to get to lunch quickly. Well, that elevator's waiting for me. I'm not waiting a few minutes. I'm getting in. First elevator I get, I'm downstairs ready to get some meat in 30 seconds. I'm ready to leave. It's 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Guess where elevator's going to be? Right where I need to be when it's time for me to leave because it's reading the patterns.
Yeah.
Imagine having a meeting, right? And you have clients coming and it's like 30 degrees outside, but your meeting room is like 35 degrees. You have to turn the heat up, but then the heat's messed up and they're like, oh, well, we automatically monitor that. Don't touch it. Well, if you're in a smart building, it's going to automatically set the heat based on a level that's comfortable for you because they understand that you have a meeting booked at this time period throughout the day. So these are some great use cases around smart buildings I've been having with a lot of users and customers. But again, to not beat a dead horse, there's a lot of positive examples of IoT.
Absolutely.
And I think that those are things we can do going forward. But at the end of the day, we do got to protect the data. We do have to make it
Right.
safe and to make it
Yeah.
effective for citizens.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And there are a lot of, there are a lot of good use cases, especially in the healthcare IoT or IoT space around, especially now that when the pandemic first started, people having devices that could get information to their doctors remotely,
Yeah.
whether it was a heart monitor or a blood glucose sensor or what have you. Those things have proven themselves to be.
Yeah, Apple Watches. I think Apple Watches are great for that. I think that with IoT, there's some great use cases in regards to the vaccinations that are taking place because those vaccines are out there. They have to be when they travel, they have to travel within a controlled environment, right? And it has to be at a certain temperature. If it's over that temperature, you lose all those vaccinations. So the supply chain is critical, right? If ever there's a time you want to work on your supply chain, it's critical. I know Quest Diagnostics, they're busy. They're busy trying to manage all these vaccines that are out there to deliver them to where they need to go. And they need to manage them effectively. And so and you can believe it, they're monitoring the temperature, they're monitoring when they leave location A to B. They're tracking to make sure these vaccinations go to where they need to go because these vaccinations are costing billions of dollars. So,
yeah, no doubt. And it's before pre-pandemic, like we still had that application because how does your beef get from the farm to the butcher? How does it get from the butcher to the grocer? Those things have to travel at particular temperatures in order to pass food safety inspections and whatnot. So there's a lot of supply chain and trucking and different aspects of the supply chain. IoT is all over that. And on my side, I've dealt with some satellite companies that play in that space, and their clients, depend on them for that very type of communication with their remote equipment, and other devices. I think the last thing that we were supposed to talk about today on the agenda I'm looking at is this notion of dark data. And when you say it, I think like dark matter and dark energy, like this all powerful, mysterious, force. But why don't you tell us about dark data? I don't even think I'd heard that term until you mentioned it to me today. So speak to that a little bit.
So dark data is kind of like dark fiber, right? When I first heard the phrase dark fiber, I'm like, what is dark fiber? And they're like, well, it's fiber that you haven't even installed, but it's off. Well, why do you want it? They're like, well, in case your regular fiber goes down, you go to your dark fiber and you fire it up and you're able to transmit data. And it's good for redundancy. So what dark data means is that that's unused data, right? You have these sensors that collect a lot. You have sensors that collect, they have a primary purpose and that's secondary purpose. But these sensors are collecting a lot more information. So the one thing that I thought was amazing was when it came to, I was building a solution, we were trying to monitor the luggage handlers in the airport. I didn't know this, but the machines that manage those baggage handlers, when those engines go bad, they get loud. The louder they are means they need to be serviced. So having a sensor that detects sound and
decibel levels,
vibration, once you hit a certain level of decibels, well, guess what? We might need to replace something in this engine. So that way this baggage claim doesn't go down. If you're in an airport and you have an escalator that goes down, baggage handler goes down, that costs time and money, and that time and money affects your rating because there's a rating out there. The airports they're monitored on, and it's based on user functionality and the user experience when they come to airports, right? And if you can imagine, if you have to redirect customers from a flight from one baggage claim to another, that's kind of time consuming, right? Yeah. If you have an escalator that gets shut down. So from a proactive maintenance perspective, these sensors are actually able to collect data that's utilized. And when you talk about dark data, that's data that's not being used, right? And it's just sitting, it's being stored, and you have not truly come up with a smart, logical way of deciphering what does this data hold? What else was it monitoring? What else can it tell us based on what it collected? And
so in a way, the dark data is kind of like an untapped oil well or gold stuck in the ground that you can't quite get out yet or something like that.
Exactly. You don't quite know what it is yet, but yet you have it. So dark data is valuable, but until you have a use case of what you can pull from that data, it really has no purpose for you. But yet it's not redundant it's still relevant compared to what you may need down the road. As of right now, you have data you've collected, you don't really know what you're using with it. And an example of that is that I found this out when I visited the BMW headquarters in Germany, Munich, some years ago. They were teaming with IBM. They put 2,000 sensors on a BMW, a 3 Series. Now, mind you, I own a 3 Series. So I thought I was the expert. Like, wait a minute, man. Why are you putting these 2,000 sensors on this BMW? There's already sensors on the BMW. What are you doing here, right? You're not going to tell me something that my car doesn't already tell me, with the sensors that are already in this car. And so, of course, the guy who's on the commercial looks like Watson, long white beard. He looks at me like, Mr. Cobbs, oh, there's so much these sensors can tell you. And I'm like, well, riddle me this. What does it tell me? It can tell it basically these 2,000 sensors they collected, they were using it to help determine my driving pattern. Because I drive a certain way, because I drive at a certain speed, my brakes, the BMW sensor on the brake pads, they only go off once you go metal to metal. But when they're putting sensors on the BMW, it would proactively tell me, based on my driving pattern, this is when you're going to have to change your brake pads.
Oh, well, predictive. They could predict the future.
Exactly. So it was predictive maintenance based on my pattern. So It can tell how fast I was driving, how hard I was on the brakes. Based on this use case and knowledge of the data it collected, it can then give me a logical response in regards to when I had to get my brakes done. And if you can imagine, right, and this is a great IoT case, you're collecting this data. Now you know I need new brake pads. Well, guess what? What if I start getting I get an ad in the paper from like a body shop? Hey, we're having a sale on brake pads, right?
I
We're having
see.
a sale getting your brakes installed. Wow, how do they know I need to get my brakes done? Then I go check my car and I realize, oh wow, I'm my brake pad is about worn out. Because again, in the BMW, it only notifies you once you go metal to metal. And when you go metal to metal, your brake pads and your brake rotors are done. But if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can change
absolutely.
your brake pads before you go metal to metal, you actually change the life. You add life to your rotors on your
Hmm.
BMW. So when I started to see that, I was like,
Further reducing maintenance costs.
exactly. So when I realized what they
Mm,
were doing, and then even the oil changes, yeah, it's an oil sensor that tells me your oil is dirty, it needs to be cleaned. But
mhm.
it's not, it can't proactively tell me when I need to get my oil changed because it doesn't understand my driving patterns. Because I'm driving faster, the car engine is hotter. And when it stays hotter at a certain period of time, that's more wear and tear on the vehicle. So guess what?
Mm.
I get to get my brakes, my oil changed, not 3 months, because I drive crazy. I got to change it every 2 months, right? But if
Yeah,
I don't have much usage, if I'm a user where I'm driving under the speed limit, well, I may not have to go 3 months. I might can go 5 months because of my
right.
driving pattern does not justify why I need to do certain things. So sensors can do a lot in regards to what you're collecting. But again, you got to make sense of it. And that's where that dark data comes in. And there's some great conversations you can have in build use cases when you're talking to customers about what they've collected thus far and what they might be trying to do next. Because you may not have to reinvent the wheel. You just may have to find a way to decipher the information they've already collected from the sensors they already have installed.
Yeah. No, that's what's up. I mean, when you bring it down to earth like that, I think people can get a better understanding of it. Because sometimes people think like, this stuff is too technical. Like my eyes glaze over when I hear people start talking, with these acronyms. But who doesn't love a BMW? You know what I mean? When you put it in those terms, I think it makes it really digestible for people.
Yeah,
So
but when you see one broken down with 2,000 sensors on it, I want to cry. Like,
yeah,
what is
yeah.
this? What is
no,
this?
no, man, that's what's up though. But so this has been great. And I've learned a lot, from this conversation, in our prior conversation. So I appreciate you taking the time, to chat with me. I can already think of like, some additional conversations that I want to have with you in the future. And so I'll save those for then. But I know for sure, because we touched on these things, our next conversation, I think we're going to talk about the confluence of IoT, machine learning, and blockchain,
Yeah.
because authenticity, in terms of the data being fed, back to the mothership, is really important.
Yeah,
But
especially in today's time. I think, especially in today's time period, that when you're looking at what happens when you pass around bad data, right? Bad information that can't be verified, it does bad things. And I think that in today's time period, that transparency is something that I think we should address. We should talk about a little bit more, just so we can authenticate some of what we're hearing in the news, right? People hear things about COVID, and if it's bad information and it's not verified, people might actually go off and start believing that. And I think that right now, this is probably a great time to have these conversations around some of these technologies to talk about transparency and how we can, make things a little bit better in society today.
yeah, man. All right. Well, cool. Well, I'll talk to you on the other side. But thanks, man, and we'll see you later.
Cool. Appreciate it.
All right. Love it.